did you do that made you successful? Mm-hmm.
I attended the first SAME, and in that conference, there was a speaker that actually made a huge impact on me. And she was the head of the Army Small Business Office. And she said, "Do you see that gentleman over there? Tell him that I sent you. He is actually a protege in a mentor-protege relationship." Exactly 6 months later, we were the first SBA mentor-protege program to be approved in the state of Indiana.
Wow.
That advice became the launching pad to CMS. Well, that truly applies to the mentality when people say, "Oh, if I'm a mentor, I'm creating a competitor." But you know what you do win? You win tremendous teaming members and committed business people that you can count on for the rest of your life.
So Mercedes, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and CMS to our audience.
Thank you, Randy. And I am glad to be here with you. And again, we have had several conversations, and I always actually learn from you.
Oh.
So hopefully I'll turn it around at some point and hear from you as well.
A lot.
So see, I am the president and one of the 3 owners of CMS Corporation. And CMS, we are actually celebrating our 20th year in business since we became owners. We bought the assets of an existing company in 2004. So it will be our 20th year anniversary on July 15th. So we are actually getting ready for a surprise to all our team members on our 20th year anniversary. So CMS is a government construction contractor, and we are a general contractor. And we operate in currently about 20 states in the US and worldwide. And in worldwide, South Korea, Japan, Spain, Guam, Puerto Rico. We finished the project in Bahamas just recently. So we have been in Hawaii, US territory as well. And looking forward and bidding for work in Australia, in the Philippines, and many other countries in Europe. So we're a global construction company, and we follow our clients. And our main clients are the Army, Air Force, Navy, or the Department of Defense, and their construction arms within those agencies.
So Mercedes, you said you all are global. You do stateside, right? So we're going to jump into that conversation. But can you back up a little bit and talk about your purchase? Because I know the company was started originally in 96 or 95, right? And then you all purchased in 2004. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So the roots of CMS are actually mechanical.
Okay.
The name that the company that started the original CMS was Custom Mechanical Systems. And it was a single owner. And I think the most he ever did in any year was about $2 million. And they did mechanical piping construction. And so we bought the assets of his company, and it was headquartered in Franklin, Indiana. Okay. And I lived in Bloomington, Indiana for 19 years. So this is the origins of where we bought the assets of the company. He sold them to another company who then sold it to Kush and me, who are the 2 owners that were the majority owners of CMS. And we had 5 financial investors at the time when we started.
Okay.
We bought the assets of the company, and our whole premise for this company was to become a federal government contractor. So from day one, we had identified the market we wanted to pursue, and then we can have fun with some of the stages, right? What we went through, what really made it.
Okay, so you have an interesting background, right? So your background is computer science, computer engineering.
Yes.
You have a bachelor's and a master's, right?
Yeah.
How did you go from computer to construction?
Yes. So my undergrad is in computer science and engineering. And my master's is in finance. So
Finance.
I
Okay.
worked for a year as a programmer after my undergrad. And at the time, that was under the work permit. I was born in Venezuela and came when I was 17, went to college and then worked for a year. And my boss actually started getting me into strategy and customer development when I worked for the first consulting firm doing programming.
Mm.
And she said, Mercedes, you really need to consider the MBA. And she knew the dean of the business school at the University of Toledo and said, go talk to the dean. And so I went to talk to him, and he said, we actually have full ride scholarships for international students at the University of Toledo.
Oh, wow.
I had a full ride and did my MBA in finance, and then actually started in manufacturing. So my first job in the US after that 1 year consulting was with Dana Corporation, and I worked for Dana 10 years, and
Okay.
that was manufacturing. In my whole stint, I started in the corporate planning department, and we advised the presidents of all the regions and the CEO, and we did financial analysis, acquisition, divestiture work. We did competitive analysis, and that kind of took me into a Dana to promote. You had to go through all the different areas. So I went through
Uh-huh.
manufacturing, marketing, business development, operations. And of course, as you know, I started in the strategic planning side. So
Okay.
after 10 years, I had child number 2. And this time, you know how it is. Every time we have a child, it's the only times we question our careers as
Mm-hmm.
mothers and women. And so I actually quit and I stayed home for a year.
Okay.
Son. And so this was the second child and my opportunity to actually live that life, right, with a baby. I
Mm-hmm.
quit. And then that is when I was approached to consider buying CMS.
Okay. So what's the relationship there?
Yeah. So I was in Indiana and my brother
Uh-huh.
owned, was owner of a company also that was doing construction, federal government work. And he came to me and he said, hey, we bought the assets of this company, and the owner was supposed to kind of transition because they wanted an angle to really do self-performing mechanical piping for the fuels work that they did.
Mm.
And he said it really hasn't worked. So the owner had really, in essence, retired and it wasn't taking off. So they sought out to sell that piece. And that's when Kush and I left our jobs full time. I worked for the university at the time. I had worked for Indiana University
Okay.
and for about a year and a half. And that was the planning for becoming an entrepreneur. And my parents, maybe I need to give you a little history. Both my parents were entrepreneurs. My mom was a pharmacy and had her own business. And my father was a lawyer and bought and sold many businesses throughout our life. So we knew at some point my
You
brother was
knew,
already
or
an
it was
entrepreneur. I was destined to be an entrepreneur, and that was something I was ready to do. By then, I had 13 years of solid work experience, really managing businesses, right? Startups or, in the case of Dana, I did many different assignments. So they really rounded up my management experience. And so the plan was we'll become a federal contractor. We will
uh-huh.
turn this mechanical construction small. There were 6 of us when we started, right? So very small. And we will turn it into a GC. That was the plan. And the market was the federal market. And so some of the very important things that we had to do to be able to take off was to get the 8A certification, which is an SBA certification for minority owned businesses, but it gives you an entryway to the federal market. So we were accepted to be waived the 2 years in business because we had tremendous experience, right? My partner and I, Kush and I, had experience. He had been in construction, and I had been obviously in many management
Mm-hmm.
positions within a manufacturing firm. So I knew how to manage companies, and the financial side was my expertise as well. So that's how we started the 8A program. And we were accepted into the program only a few months after we started the company. Yes.
Yeah. So because of your brother's experience in federal, that led you guys to choose the federal as your main client.
Indeed. Now,
Okay.
what's awesome is his experience was actually with a small business for a very small time, but they were actually an other than small business. So he had never been through the 8A program or the mentor-protégé program or some of the things that we brought to the table. But the marketplace and the fact that the federal marketplace was a very viable, growing business in construction was a very important key to deciding to actually buy the assets of this company.
Awesome. So, and I'm gonna come back to that comment about viable, growing, sector for the federal. So you went from, okay, we bought the business in 2004. You get your 8A 2005.
Yes.
So we know that the 8A certification, as you said, is like the door, right? It opens a particular door, but you still have to walk through the door. You still have to perform. You still have to do all these things. So can you step us through, like, how did you become so successful though? Because you outgrew, just to kind of give, a little hint, or foreshadow of what's to come. You guys outgrew the small business status.
Yes.
So how did you successfully do that? Because not all 8As are successful, right? You can have the certification, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. So please share, what did you do that made you successful?
So Randy, I'm going to tell you a little story. So in December of 2005, I attended the first SAME Small Business Conference, and it was in Crystal City in Washington.
Okay.
And in that conference, there was a speaker that actually made a huge impact on me. Her name she has passed since, Tracy Pinson. And she was the head of the Army Small Business Office at the Army Corps at the time.
Okay.
And when she made her presentation and talked about all the forecasts for projects and opportunities with the Army Corps of Engineers, they were all 10 million and up. And here we had just started, right? So our bonding program was what, $250,000?
Okay.
So about $10 million opportunity. So I went to her and I said, Miss Pinson, can you, I saw the amazing opportunities. I know we're in the right market, but how do we scale? How do we go from what we have now to being able to pursue opportunities like the ones that you presented today? And she said, do you see that gentleman over there? Tell him that I sent you. He is actually a protege in a mentor-protege relationship. And I want him to kind of walk with you through the conference, but mostly to tell you about the mentor-protege program. Okay, so I went to this gentleman, and of course, as soon as I told him Mrs. Pinson sent me your way, he said, oh, absolutely. Mrs. Tracy Pinson is
right. Okay.
the best. And so he told me all about the program. Well, let me tell you that exactly 6 months later, we were the first SBA Mentor Protege program to be approved in the state of Indiana.
Wow.
And that marked the beginning of us being able to pursue what the federal government calls IDIQ contracts, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. And we had selected such an amazing mentor that they understood that for 8A sole sources, which are negotiated with the government, we could do those on our own and we could pursue those on our own. And there are many incredible small business deputies that are part of the federal government, Army, Air Force, Navy, that you can go talk to if you're a small business as an 8A contractor. That is one avenue of work. But the other most important avenue is to really pursue 8A competitive and small business set-aside work. So with our mentor, we were able to do that because here you are doubling your past performance because 51% accounts towards your revenues, but you really are pursuing much larger contracts. As long as you can bond your 51%, you're in good shape. So at the very beginning, as I told you, our bonding was $250,000.
Right.
It grew quite rapidly. Obviously, the more working capital your company gets, the larger your bonding program. And we were able to pursue perhaps a $10 million contract where our piece was $5 million. Right?
Still keeping you in a smaller bucket for yourself, your comfort. Right.
earning and winning and getting the past performance of double what we could have done on our own.
Right. So
And most
double past
importantly,
performance.
yeah, for
Mhm.
IDIQs, you really require that past performance. You have to prove that you have done it. And so it's always the chicken or the egg, right? You just became an 8A, you don't have the past performance.
Mhm.
With a mentor, you do. So that advice from Tracy Pinson became the launching pad to CMS
Mm.
to succeed in the 8A program. And I don't know if you know this, at the time, the 8A program was 9 years. I know there have been exceptions where it's been 10 years because of COVID,
Mhm.
but it was 9 years long. It had two distinct stages. So the developmental stage and then the transitioning stage. Well, during the developmental stage, we were already doing and winning IDIQ contracts and doing task orders under those contracts. We were already bidding small business set aside work with our mentor, which we could never have done as an 8A operating on our own.
Mhm.
And we really did have a terrific mentor, and they understood when we could or could not. And so we never stretched beyond what we could pursue, and we could bond on our 51%. So our working capital grew and our opportunities grew.
So do you mind me asking you about your mentor? If companies are listening to this and they want to go pursue, right, the mentor-protégé program, what should they look for in a mentor? How large was your mentor? You are only bonding 250,000. So what did you bring to the table, but for them to say, yes, I want to mentor you, right? And become part of this relationship. So can you share a little bit more for
Yes.
us?
Do you remember I mentioned that CMS's roots were mechanical construction?
Right.
Never stopped self-performing mechanical piping.
Ah, okay.
So we were not just an 8A that was a GC. We actually were an 8A that could be a subcontractor. So we did both, right? At the very beginning, as you can imagine, when you get the 8A, we were already bidding work for the federal government as an emerging small business, which existed at the time. So
Right.
it was for
Okay.
task orders under $750,000. We were bidding emerging small business work for the Navy at Crane, Indiana. So we were already marketing ourselves via our pursuits, but we were self-performing work for companies like Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech, oh my goodness. They make all the cartons. It'll come to me in a second.
That's fine.
No, yes. So we were doing work. We were doing work for Air Liquide. We were doing work for Praxair. We were building the plants that are the mechanical plants that feed the energy to manufacturing plants. So our mentor had been doing fuels construction work, and we
Ah.
could not perform the mechanical.
So it
Our,
was a perfect relationship. You
yes,
brought great value to them.
yes, we did.
Yes. Mm.
And they were actually a much larger small business about to become other than small.
Okay.
And the only way they could pursue small business set aside work would have been through us. So it was a win-win.
It
A
was.
mentor, so they were not huge. And I think you asked me the very key question is how large was your mentor?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we say that a mid-size mentor is the best mentor.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they're not
Okay.
so large, they're not so large that they would have no appetite for small business set aside work, right?
Mm-hmm. So
And
can you define mid-size for the audience?
boy,
I know we've talked about this before, but can you define mid-size?
you have all the right questions for this. Uh, a mid-size is a company that is doing federal government work and has done federal government work and has a portfolio and a past proven performance with the federal government, but recently became other than small. In
Okay.
other words, the government, as you know, you're either small or you're other than small.
Mm-hmm.
And in the other than small, the water is really deep when you make it.
Right.
And the reason is you have really well established large businesses, and there are hardly any in the middle. And the reason is when you make the jump to other than small, you're competing with unrestricted companies that have been doing work more years than we have, more than our 20 years, and in addition, are doing much larger work for the federal government.
Right.
So only 2.5% of companies, Randy, that jump from small to other than small, ever win, after 5 years, ever win any more federal contracts. So they exit the market, they go bankrupt, or they sell their businesses to other larger businesses.
So we are going to definitely talk on that topic here shortly. So audience, hold on. We're coming. We're rounding the
My
corner.
passion. So
Yes, this is Mercedes' passion. That's why I wanted her
the
here.
middle market, as you know,
Mid-market.
you
Mhm.
you left a small business. There's really no federal government oversight for mid-sized businesses
Right.
in the federal government. It's small or other than small. Well, those companies, to continue and to make their transition, do need to continue to probably perform small business set-aside work. Bingo, that's what CMS could do for our mentor. So CMS was an avenue for our mentor to be able to pursue small business set-aside work, which only with us they could do. And they were not so large that they had no appetite for the size of the work that we could bond. And truly, the company did grow very quickly. And as you know, it's not very difficult to scale. And I say that tongue in cheek. It's not as difficult to scale a construction business as it would be to scale, for example, a consulting business. So in a consulting business, how do you generate revenue? Hours worked, revenue, right? In a construction business, as a GC, which is how the government buys construction, you can have the same 5 projects. Let's say that you started with 5 projects, but instead of doing 5 $250,000 projects, you do 5 $1 million projects, and you're doing 5 million instead of 1.25 million.
Right. That is true.
Okay? And then you do, I mean, right now we do the same 60-ish concurrent projects, but all we're doing is we are increasing the average size of the projects we win. So you don't have to scale people, which is the biggest complexity to growing a business, is scaling people. That is the biggest challenge for scaling a business. It's people. So if indeed you're growing, and in our case, we were very strategic. We kept our mechanical construction very strategic, and we kind of kept it at a size that was manageable always. So it was a strategic weapon because we did a lot of sole source work for boiler replacement, chiller replacements, underground piping, steam and condensate piping work. We did above ground condensate and piping work. We did all that work, but we always kept that crew size within manageable parameters that we could self-perform it. So our complexity was never growing people, which is the hardest. Our complexity was really pursuing the larger average size project that then grew our revenue.
Okay, so and some interesting things you shared there. And so can you share like what their bonding capacity was then as a mid-market, almost mid-market company?
So I actually don't know that.
Okay.
As our mentor, I don't remember asking that question, but I can tell you because we are now
You are now mentors.
was.
Right. Yes, you are a mentor now. So yeah, sure.
So $500 million is a typical bonding size for a mid-size contractor. And as I share with you, just like we learned from Tracy Pinson and that wonderful gentleman that helped me the very first conference I attended, that doesn't change when you become a mid-tier contractor. You still share the pie, you still joint venture to pursue things that are larger than you could do on your own. But this time, you're not just joint venturing with small businesses, you truly are joint venturing with other large businesses that do not play in the federal market.
So then now you've just started your transition follow-on question, right? So now that you all have grown, so when you exited the 8A program, for example, right? 9 years later, right?
I want to tell you about that.
Okay, go ahead.
So not many companies, when they graduate from 8A, continue to become sustainable fellow
Right.
contractors. That is
Mhm.
a fact. And it's a scary statistic. For CMS, we started preparing for that, just like the program actually teaches you to, which says you cannot survive on just 8A set aside work.
Mhm.
You truly need to be positioning yourself to do small business set aside work and hopefully unrestricted work. But it's too early to really do unrestricted work, although CMS did pursue and win some unrestricted work. But we were doing small business set aside work when we were 8A the last 6 years of the program. So when we transitioned, we had a pipeline of IDIQ contracts that were small
Mhm.
business set aside, and we were now a small business. So that I call that the bridge. We built our own bridge to
Right.
be able to survive beyond 8A until we start winning small business set aside work. But I want to tell you, just like we were never constant and we didn't stay the same, neither does the Small Business Administration. And as you
Mhm.
know, many things change. Not only did the size standards get updated, also the number of years used to calculate what became a small business
Right.
size went from 3 years
Mhm.
average to 5 years. And for a
Yep.
little bit there, it even allowed you to do 5-year average or 3-year average,
It-
whichever one was most convenient for you.
Right.
And then it became a 5-year. And
Mhm.
then guess what happened to the mentor-protégé program? They actually became and came up with a small business mentor-protégé
Sure.
program.
Mhm.
It's an all small mentor-protégé program.
Right.
So many things changed. And as things changed, so did we.
Mhm.
We strategized based on what was available to us. Because we would have graduated from being small if the 3 to 5 year had not changed in 2015. Scary. Imagine that. We
Yeah.
were absolutely not ready at that time to be another than small business.
Mhm.
We were absolutely not ready. Uh, and but for those changes by the SBA, we would have been. So now we
Right.
became other than small in 2023, which was the perfect time for us. We had prepared, we had received, been awarded, and had what we called our next bridge. The next bridge is the next $12.5 billion of IDIQ contracts that would allow us to make the jump from small to other than small under those contracts because we still have task orders that we compete against. You are grandfathered by when you were small,
Mhm.
when you bid, or when you were awarded those contracts.
Yes, which is just sweet, right? Like that's that sweet spot. So I love that strategy of get yourself on IDIQ contracts as a small, right? And it'll sustain you for at least what, 5 to 10 years? Because some IDIQ contracts could be as long as 7 to 10 years. Most of them are 5. So that is a long-term strategy. Love that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing to
But
help
we did the
bridge
same
that
thing.
gap.
Yes. So Randy, we did the same thing. When we were
Yeah.
able to become small, we did the exact same thing when we were small to become other than small.
Mm-hmm.
So truly, the strategy repeats. It's constancy, right? You need to know where you're headed and you need to know how you're going to cover yourself. And then guess what? We became really amazing joint venture partners. We were a mentor to 8As and women-owned small businesses before we were other than small. We were never a protege again to anyone. We never wanted to be a protege again because we didn't need to,
It.
but we were
Right.
a mentor. And so we know how to joint venture. We know how to take a pie and split it in half and truly aim to grow in that pie. And not many mentor protege programs do it that simply. It's actually really simple. You should never fight to what slice of the pie you take and whether you take more from the mentor or more from the protege. You truly should think of a pie. And if you split it in half, then both parties to the joint ventures aim to make more money, to grow the pie, to win more contracts under those awards, to grow the margins of those contracts, to execute the contracts and finish them before the deadline so that you can actually buy out the contracts and actually make more money. So we became really good mentors and
Yeah.
really good joint venture partners. And that is the next stage, which is what are we doing now?
What are you doing now, right? And I love that mindset of, so the mindset though of abundance is so key versus scarcity, right? If you, right, it's a different switch of, well, I have to hoard and do and fight for every little crumb versus no, there's more than enough to go around. We split it evenly and let's move to the next and the next and the next and keep splitting. We're gonna grow this thing so much larger versus we're gonna fight you for every percentage point, you know, that we can get out of it.
You got it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, another reason when I've heard the perils of mentor-protégé programs not going well, it's somebody got greedy.
Yeah.
They did not focus on the real thing, which is to win work and to execute work and to grow that pie.
Yeah.
They were fighting up over who does what, right? They did not really reach consensus on every decision. You want to reach consensus. It's not the majority that rules. It really is consensus. You have to use each other's experience and you have to be able to listen to each other. And that is what makes a good joint venture. Well, in the federal government, even though it's a huge market, right? $9+ billion per year, right? It's an incredible marketplace. The government always pays. If you give an appropriate invoice, you get paid within 15 days. So typically you're not cash flowing the government client. So it is truly an incredible, as a construction company, you have to leave the money in the company. Working capital is what defines your bonding program. So if you're growing, you have to keep the money in the business. So all those things, again, you have to be looking long term. The owners of whoever you're mentoring cannot be greedy. They can't be thinking, I want to get rich now, because truly it's much later that you're going to do that because the money stays in the business. If you're growing enough, yeah.
So that, okay, so that is great for those who are listening of, you know, not being greedy, thinking long-term. With JVs, we know that there is a limit on the amount of time, right, that you can have and the number of projects that even, right? No, they've changed it. So the amount of time. So you can go after so many projects within that limited time frame that you have. Why bicker about the money? Just keep going and add to it, right? And so was that the strategy you came out when you outgrew your small business profile? Did you already know, okay, we're gonna hit the road running with, we already know we have all the IDIQs, right? We've got those in place. But to keep growing beyond the IDIQs, right? Because those gonna run out. They're only gonna be the cash cow for so long, right? Because you are all over the world working. So were you already starting to work all over the world as a small business?
Yes.
Or only when you, okay.
So $5 billion of the 12.5 that I mentioned we had in contract capacity of IDIQs awarded to CMS before we made the jump, 5 billion of that were with the Air Force. And the Air Force is a global client, and we held 4 contracts, 3 that were continental US, and 1, the worldwide engineering and construction contract, which is a worldwide contract. So we followed our client. Our job is to allow our client to meet their mission and to do their construction. And we follow them. So we've gone with the Air Force to South Korea, to Japan, to Bahamas, to Puerto Rico, to Guam. I may be forgetting 1 or 2, so forgive me, but yes. So we have followed our client for the last 8 years, the Air Force client outside the US, for the opportunities where we can add value and we can be competitive. So it's a mix of the two. So we were doing global work, but there's one contract that defined us as truly we have transitioned.
Okay.
And we won our first unrestricted contract, and that was in Spain. So,
yes, I remember you telling me about Spain. So can you share about that? About that experience? Like, okay, unrestricted. Now we've got to think a little bit different, right? Especially being outside of the comfort of being on US soil. So I'd love to hear about that strategy.
So that is when we tested our joint venture with someone that was not doing federal government work. And where we added tremendous value because we knew how to propose, how to win IDIQs, how to bid the task orders, how to win the task orders. And they were a very established, or they are a very established company in Spain that does construction work all over the world. And but for the federal government at that time in Spain. So we approached them and we said, we have a value proposition. We can absolutely bond. This was a $250 million IDIQ. And the task orders, you know, the largest that we hold today, we have a portfolio. We have won 3 projects, 100 million of the 3 combined. One is 50, one is 12, one is 20 something. So we have a portfolio of 100 million, but we were able to prove not only can we bid and win the IDIQ, the strategy worked, check, but also we can win task orders and execute them. So now we are working with our partner in Spain. We have a terrific, the projects will be done in 2025, the first few. I think actually all 3 will be completed in 2025. We're bidding additional work under that IDIQ in Spain. So we hope to be there for the many years to come. And now we have also pursued, and those have not been awarded yet, but we have pursued other IDIQ unrestricted contracts with the same strategy. If we alone don't have the past performance because we were small until 2023, right? Then we need those that have the past performance but don't have the experience with the client and may not have the group that we have, the proposal team, the estimating team, the engineering team, they have those teams, but they're focused on other markets, not the federal market. So there's one thing I want to tell you, you know, when I said you don't want to fight, you truly want to focus on when if you grow the pie. Well, that truly applies to the mentality when people say, oh, if I'm a mentor, I'm creating a competitor. You may be creating a competitor, but you're never going to stop moving. You're going to be succeeding and growing. And hopefully you'll be continuing to succeed and grow at a faster pace than your protege. But you know what you do win? You win tremendous teaming members and committed business people that you can count on for the rest of your life. And that is key. This is a very large market in dollars, but it's a very, very small market in people. And those relationships are what take us. Those are the relationships that you develop to really find the partners to succeed to the next level and the next level and the next level. But you have to value, you never have to think of a competitor actually today could be your best teaming member or something that when you come together could not, neither one of us could win without each other. That is to me a win-win. That is what you need to seek and never think.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like competimates, right? They talk about.
You know what? I had never heard that.
Oh, you haven't? Okay, competimates.
Yeah, there you go. That I will add that to my lingo now. Yes.
And it goes back again to the abundant mindset. It really does, right? So it's like we can be stronger together. Yes, sometimes we may be competing against each other, but we can still be stronger together. And the federal government, after a while, it becomes small, like you said, right? It becomes small, especially if you're a company that performs well, you have integrity, right? You're a true asset. I mean, it does become small after a while, and you do develop great relationships. So I love also how you think about that. You're developing even stronger teaming partners if you were to, JV and support each other. So I love that thought. So if you were to summarize it to like, hey, you guys are now your mid-market. So these are the things you should be doing so you don't die, right? That you don't drown out here.
Yes.
What would be those, like, I don't know, 5 things if there was 5 things that they should be thinking about?
One is cover yourself on having a mentor-protégé, so in times of challenges, you have a pipeline of work that you have. Make sure when you entered that you had plenty of a pipeline of IDIQs to make that transition. I don't want to minimize it. It's a very, very rough transition and it's tough. And I always tell people, tongue in cheek, right? I always say, the story still has to be written. We've transitioned for 2 years. We're being successful in 2 years, but more has to be seen. The rest remains to be seen. We have to continue to win work. We have to win unrestricted work. We have to perform and execute brilliantly on the work that we win, because you're only as good as your last job. In construction, it's critical that every job is executed to the standards or beyond of what your clients require. So make sure you have the right team. Make sure you have a pipeline. You must have a pipeline of work that you can bid when you transition. And immediately ensure, hopefully before you make the jump, but most definitely the moment you make the jump, you have to start winning unrestricted work. We actually won unrestricted work before we made the jump. So,
and that's a great practice, right? That you can sharpen your pencils, you can write as well as the larger firms. Even if you don't win, start bidding so you can get feedback, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to team. In our case, we knew the joint venture strategy was the way to go. We did it when we were very small.
Right.
Did it when we became mentors to proteges and we were still small, and we're doing it now. So that formula of truly successfully executing on joint ventures will carry you. It will truly help you during that transition.
So joint ventures is the key.
Joint ventures, right people. You have to add value to an unrestricted partner, right? And you must have a pipeline of work before you make the jump. Make sure you have a pipeline of work before you make the jump.
Can you speak to that pipeline when you say must have a pipeline of work?
Yeah. So the beauty of the federal government contracting is that they do issue and award IDIQs. And these IDIQs, as you said beautifully, you said the majority are 5 years, but many go up to 10 years. Those IDIQs are buckets. We call it the toolbox. And then every year they issue task orders and you compete against the rest of a much smaller world of competitors under that IDIQ for the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years that the IDIQ is in place. Well, during that time, if you have 5 years remaining of IDIQ capacity work, because you've been awarded those IDIQs, you're going to continue to bid against those IDIQs and you have a pipeline of work. Even if you, God forbid, you were not to win unrestricted work like we did right before we made the jump, you still would be able to absolutely be okay for over 5 years.
That is wonderful. Thank you for breaking it down some more. When you were saying pipeline, I wanted to make sure people were connecting when you say pipeline to the task orders, right? To the potential task
creating
orders.
your own pipeline. But now we're going to go, whenever you're ready, I want to talk to you about our legislative efforts.
Yes, we're definitely going to transition to talk about that. So there's one other thing I want to talk about before we go to some of the great work that Mercedes is doing for those mid-market companies. You talked several times about the beauty of the federal government, about the benefits of the federal government. Can you share some of those? Because you have done both commercial and federal, right? So if you were to compare the two, I know they are hard to compare, but if you were to compare the two, what would you say pros and cons would be?
Yes. So I only see pros in both, right?
Okay.
It's a matter of choice. You can succeed in either market. What I have not seen very well is when you succeed in both, really, right? Unless you're able to segregate the one from the other, you cannot use the same cost structure or the same business structure for both markets. So that perhaps is the key to your question is, can you do both? Yes. Can you do them both if you have the exact same formula and the same organization and everything structured? No. So what CMS did is, remember I told you we always kept that competitive advantage, which is our self-performing unit, and they always were. Well, 2 years ago, we also acknowledged we are going to be making the jump to other than small, and the cost structure for that team does not help the commercial side. So we actually brought in an additional owner. He was somebody that had been working for CMS and was leading the business development. And he's an engineer, both undergrad and master's in mechanical engineering, extremely capable individual, part of the family. And we asked him if he wanted to become an owner of that. So we took the commercial group and made it its own LLC, still, majority owned by CMS Corporation.
Okay.
But it's run independently and it has its own cost structure,
Okay.
and it has its own team, and it continues to provide CMS what we love, which is that competitive advantage that if we're doing fuels work, we have a self-performing team. So that we recognized that had to be done. So now, if you're a small business, every revenue counts against you. And when you're growing and you're bumping into that size standard, we always kept that commercial business very small on purpose, because any revenue counts against you. And if we were growing and getting ready to make the jump to other than small, we couldn't grow that unit because it would be taking away revenues that we could be winning and executing on the federal market side. So clearly, we were not maximizing what that commercial unit could do, but we always kept it as that strategic weapon of self-performing, where we added value. And mechanical, as you know, is easy 35% of any construction project. We always had that competitive advantage.
You gotta have it, right? Yeah.
So now we are other than small. Now revenues don't really matter. They have their own unit. That unit is growing beautifully, but it has its own leadership, its own cost structure, its PMs that know their clients, right? It's separate from the federal construction group. The government on the federal side buys construction. They want general contractors to manage the work. They don't buy self-performance. They buy expertise to manage construction projects to the quality standards required, on-time delivery, and with highly technical expertise to manage the subcontractors. So now that group is its own group, which is the main CMS Corporation, continues to be, and we are growing that in that expertise. And remember what I told you for scaling. What is the most complexity item for scaling? It's people.
People. Mm-hmm.
In this case, we're growing the average number, the size of the projects, instead of necessarily growing the number of projects that we're executing in the portfolio. So we have 60 to 70, 66 at any point in time, right?
Okay.
Well, now instead of being, if we have almost $500 million of backlog, then the average size of the projects is much larger, but it's not a huge greater amount of projects that we're doing.
So there, like, I love that, that you can do both.
Mm-hmm.
Each have its own benefits. Just you need to figure out the strategy behind how you're going to do them both well.
Yes. And I highly recommend that you do have your own leadership for that group.
The commercial side.
Yes.
Yeah, because definitely the federal government is its own animal, right? It's very unique. And so, yes, the things that you do on the commercial side does not work necessarily for.
Or vice versa, right? Your cost structure on the federal side may not be the same as your cost structure on the commercial side. So you really have to look at them through their own glasses.
Lens, yes.
Yeah.
Through their own lens.
Yes.
So, okay, well, I appreciate you sharing that, Mercedes, because you have both experiences, because there may be some people listening that are in the commercial space that want to do federal contracting, or they're in the federal and they realize they need to diversify and go in the other direction as well. So that's an important tip to share with them. So yes, let's dive in a little bit. So Mercedes is also an advocate, if you can't tell by now, right, for mid-market. And she has been doing some great things with her coalition. And so I would love for Mercedes to share about her coalition and what they are doing for the mid-market companies in the federal space.
So I'll start with a little story. In 21, 2 years before we became Other Than Small, I was asked to be on a panel, an SAME panel, and the director of SAME, his name is Joe Sherdell at the time, the director, he's retired since. And Joe was passionate about government industry engagement. So we call it IG, Industry Government Engagement Initiatives within SAME. And now we were both invited to be part of a panel called Small Business Size Standards. And I remember we discussed, well, if we're going to talk about size standards within SAME, and it was COVID time. And so all these conferences were virtual. So we were having a conversation just like you and I are having today. And I said, why don't we invite somebody from the SBA? So Sam Lee from the SBA was able to join us on that panel. And during that conversation, the idea that perhaps we don't have the right formula of how we can incentivize small businesses to succeed beyond small came up. And I said, that is such an interesting and important question. And I talked to my brother, who's the CEO now of CMS Corporation, and he came to work with us in 2014. I said, Ernest, could I hire a couple interns, really sharp interns, and could you cover me 100% and I could take 6 weeks to work on answering that question? That, it is so timely because we are about
to
being Other Than Small, and we're transitioning ourselves. Boy, if we could come up with the answer to how to successfully transition instead of the horrible statistics that to this day plague this marketplace, right? So he said, go do it. So that's what I did. I hired a couple of interns, and under Joe Sherdell's guidance, he and the SBA also participated, and we had every other week updates. And whenever we would come down and say, oh, that doesn't work, or no, the SBA isn't going to really change the size standards, because the problem is not the size standards. The problem is, what do you do if you outgrow your size standard, but you enter these very deep waters, right? We call it the cliff, we called it the deep ocean, many names, right? So it was fascinating. And after that 6 weeks, we actually came up with the answer. And the answer was, even though there is no medium-sized administration, there's no MBA, right? You have the SBA and you have everything else. There's no medium business administration, no MBA. We truly needed to lobby for those mid-sized businesses. And the lobbying was that when you make that jump from small to Other Than Small, you need that bridge. And not every company, only 2.5% of companies attempt to even make the jump. Right? Very few companies. Yeah, very, very few companies are crazy enough to do what we're doing. We had no choice, by the way. We finally said, we believe a growing business is a thriving business.
Yes.
And we decided that we were going to do what we had to do to make the jump. But we did prepare, right? Just like I told you in 2015, we were not ready. And luckily, we didn't have to be ready because the SBA made changes to the size standards and to the calculation of small business. It gave us the additional years to be able to get ready. Okay? But we said it is not fair and it doesn't seem right that what we were able to do, which is very difficult to do, that others couldn't do. So we decided that the results of the 6 weeks of work was a paper that we published, and we circulated through SAME and all the people that helped us, right? FedMine, GovCon actually helped us with the data. The SBA helped us. We shared that with the SBA, the Army, Air Force, Navy. We shared it with the leaders of NAFAC and the Army Corps of Engineers and AFCEC. So we really socialized this. And then the next thing that magically happened is we needed to find more people like CMS. So I realized that there were many of us in the same boat. Obviously, throughout the 6 weeks of work, we would go to the SME Kitty Hawk post, which really helped us to make the presentation and really challenge the minds of the people that were there, whether small or large. And so people were against it, and some people were pro it, and people were like, oh, I don't know if it applies to my industry, right?
Right.
Or it applies to engineering, or if it applies to. So anyway, to make a long story short, 15 amazing companies became a coalition, just like CMS. And I led the coalition, and I am not leading the coalition this year. I'm really proud that Mike Ramos from Raymond Engineering, I asked him last year, at the end of last year, we have now been not small for 2 years. I really believe that the best leader for this coalition is somebody that's small, that's fighting to go to that next stage. And the rest of the coalition supported it. We have been an amazing team. I want to tell you that is one of the greatest strengths of this entire initiative, is that we have come together as companies to actually go to Congress and ask for the implementation and to make a change so that you can truly create a medium-sized business group within the federal government marketplace. Because this is unique. The only marketplace industry that hits a glass ceiling where you reach that small business size standard is the federal marketplace. That's not the case for commercial.
You just keep going. Right.
No glass ceiling saying, oh, just because you're making this jump, now you truly need to compete with multi-billion-dollar companies. That is absolutely only the case in the federal market. So we came together. We have disabled veteran-owned businesses, woman-owned businesses, plain Jane small businesses, and Hub Zone and disabled. I already mentioned disabled veteran-owned businesses. So it was all the same. It applies to all. And magically this year, we realized that it not only applies, we did then, but it really crystallized this year. It applies to every NAICS code that the federal government buys. And the DOD in particular has been very vocal, saying this is a real problem. Our base is shrinking, which is, it is a shrinking industry. The small business industrial base continues to shrink. And we know that it continues to shrink because you have these very large small businesses stuck at the top, and they dominate that market. So any newcomer has the exact same effect of competing against giants as we do now, competing against unrestricted giants. So it is a complete problem that we believe legislatively could be alleviated and create a much beautiful, healthy pipeline to the federal government client to execute our mission.
So can you, a couple of things. So do you have in your coalition, you said it, of course, we know it pertains to every NAICS code, right? Because small to small across the board. So in your coalition, it's comprised of what types of companies currently?
Remember, the umbrella for us was SAME, the Society of American Military Engineers. And the members of SAME are
all construction,
Army, Air Force, Navy, VA, GSA, and AEC.
Architect, engineering, construction companies. Okay.
We all do share today that in common, but as we reach out beyond, we find that we have friends and people that believe in this cause and would support this cause and have signed a petition to support this cause that are not in our industries.
Okay,
but
good.
We came together because we had something in common.
Right. And that's why I asked if, because I knew, yes, you guys started under SAME, but if, since you've grown, have you been able to include technology companies or professional services, et cetera? So, okay.
I believe that, so in 2022 December, the bill, the Success Act bill, was introduced in the House. It was not passed that year. It was introduced December 22nd, 2022. And we had bipartisan sponsors from both the House and the Senate to include the small business committee members, some small business committee members. And now the biggest issue that we've had since is that the small business committees in Congress say, this is really not a small business legislation, but it really is a medium business legislation. And we are charged with representing the interests of small businesses. So they don't quite know what to do. We keep telling them, if you actually represent the benefits of the small businesses, you want them to grow. You
Right.
want them to transition beyond small. There should be nothing that says that a small business has to be small all their lives. Because if the market they chose to compete in really would kill them if they made the jump, that
Right.
doesn't make sense. And
Right.
you want a healthy, remember, a thriving business is a growing business. A growing business is
Absolutely.
a thriving business, right? So you want that in your marketplace. We have all the statistics. We've presented all the statistics, but they have really been challenged by that. So then this year we went to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the Armed Services Committees, and we asked them the question. We know this is a matter of national security. We know that the shrinking industrial small base will compromise national security.
Right.
It is doing so in some industries already. So we went to them and asked the same question. Wouldn't you want to solve this problem so you really do have a healthy pipeline of incoming innovators, small businesses, and transitioning businesses that can supply you and provide the services that you need throughout the chain, throughout the life cycle? And at the end of the day, now they're struggling with, does this require small business? To say, we agree with it. So we are right there. And I really hope that common sense will prevail, that they understand that fixing the problem is more important of whose jurisdiction it lies on,
Yes.
and that it will come through. But we've changed and added some coalition members throughout the years. We, as you know, we are not small now for 2 years. We are on our way. I don't know if CMS will ever benefit from the legislation, but we really do believe in the greater good, and we have continued to contribute to the coalition last year and this year.
So can you share what is your definition for mid-market for those companies, right? So yes, every NAICS code will have a different requirement of what makes you small. So once they hit that amount, right, over 5 years average, to what point would the legislation affect them or help them?
So we believe it's about 4 times the revenue of the size standard.
About 4 times the revenue.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is when we did our analysis, and we were asked that question by Senator Young's office. He's an Indiana senator that has been a tremendous supporter of this legislation. And he's also a member of the Senate Small Business Committee. And he asked us that question, and we did the analysis and presented it to them. And we felt that 4 times the size standard would be appropriate by the time we believe a company could grow to be that size within those 7 years of the transitioning program, and then they would be on their own. So that would be large enough to allow them to build an unrestricted portfolio to be able to make the jump, which is what CMS is doing. But we started, remember, doing this and pursuing this before we ever made the jump, in addition to saying we need to fundamentally fix the problem. But I'll give you an example. If you're a disabled veteran-owned small business, and you do work for the VA, or you do work for the Department of Defense as a disabled veteran-owned small business, and you get awarded contracts, did you know that you need to recertify every year to prove that you're still a disabled veteran-owned small business?
Correct.
Just think for a minute what happens to their pipeline. They will never be able to build a pipeline that we built for disabled veteran-owned small business, because the next year, even though they have those IDIQs, when they're no longer disabled veteran owned, because they're no longer small, you have to be small to be disabled veteran owned, then they lose all their
All
coverage.
the benefit, they lose the benefit of it.
So that's one perfect example how it is impossible. It's suicidal to make the jump if you're a disabled veteran owned small business.
You'll lose a lot of your business.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
have 1 year. You have 1 year of a bridge that you can build. Do you think 1 year is enough? No. So then I'm going to go back to a question you asked earlier. When you said, Mercedes, why did some companies want to diversify? That's precisely what they would need to do. And I'll give you one example, and it's actually an African-American owned business headquartered in St. Louis, Worldwide Technologies. It's now the largest, I think it's the largest African-American owned business in the country.
Yeah.
They started as an 8A company. Then they became small. And guess what they did when they were ready to be other than small? They exited the federal marketplace completely. When they became a $1 billion company, they circled back and said, okay, now we can compete for federal government work. And now they're doing federal government work as well. So they left. The federal government did not, even though they invested, the SBA programs were alive and well, they helped them really launch their career and their business. They left the federal marketplace completely, and they circled back when they were hard to be able to really compete. So that's what a disabled veteran-owned business would have to do. They would have to completely exit before they outgrow their size. So they would slowly shrink away from doing federal government work,
do commercial
work, get out, and then come back. Is that what the federal government wants? Is that what the SBA is all about? No. The SBA's programs and incentives are to create sustainable federal government contractors. All of the programs and all the money that we fund, that all these amazing programs, if you read what the premise of the 8A program is to create sustainable federal contractors, not sustainable small business minority federal contractors. It's to create sustainable federal contractors. But guess what? Most people either sell, they die, or they get out. So are they really sustainable? What they're saying they want? Right. No. But you know what it is? Right now, I do believe Congress is at fault for this problem. And they're more at fault if they do nothing. If they stand there knowing, having all the statistics and all the data to know that this is a real problem, and they don't make the change. So yeah, that is, to me, fascinating. It's a great opportunity to fundamentally revert the trend of the shrinking investor base in the federal government marketplace. And it's in the hands
of Congress at this point. Well, our debts would be definitely to the coalition. What's the name of the coalition so people can go look you guys up and keep up with what you're doing?
Yes. So it's the Pilot Coalition.
Coalition.
And I'm going to give you the website, and I'm actually going to type it as I'm giving it to you. www.cmscorp.com/success.
Okay. So www.cmscorp.com/success.
Yeah, /success.
Yes. For the pilot.
Yes. And the bill that was introduced in December of 22 is called the Success Bill.
Yes, the Success Bill of December 2022.
Yeah.
So that is one place, audience, you guys can go and just keep up with what the coalition is doing to support the mid-market. We know that there is great opportunities there. We just don't want to lose those contractors. And you're right, it should not be hard to grow your business, right? That is something that we want companies to be able to look at. Man, it should be a straightforward path. Like, why do I have to have so many hurdles to jump over? Why make it so difficult? especially when, as you said, right, the industrial base is declining exponentially. So why keep giving us more hurdles to jump over? Right.
And
So
if you're a small business starting and thinking like we did in 2004, right? We said we're going to pursue the federal government marketplace. If we had been there at that point, and I had two choices, we could have owned commercial, industrial, or federal, right? We chose federal. But if I had known that I would hit a glass ceiling when I became that 5-year average 47 or whatever.
45 mil.
Yeah, I know it's higher now, but now I haven't been small for 2 years on it. 47.5 million. Then would I have chosen to go into the federal marketplace? That makes me wonder. Because if somebody had told me I had to artificially stay at now a 5-year average within that size to truly continue to thrive and grow, makes you think. So the one that is to lose here and the one that is losing here is the federal government.
Federal government, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But for those that are larger that wants to come in to the space, they have to learn the strategy of how to do it well.
Yes. And they would team with people like us now. Because we are mid-market, we have done it, we know how to do the work, and it would be the best way to enter the market. Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been wonderful, Mercedes. I am so glad, and
My pleasure.
I am so glad that we were able to do this. So thank you for coming and sharing your success story, for sharing your proven tips and tricks, right? The things that have gotten you to where CMS currently is. For you to have grown from 250,000 in bonding to what you said, 500 million?
$500 million, yeah.
To 500 million in bonding. That speaks to your resilience, your creativity, your staying power, all of it. So
it's a team. We have an amazing.
So how many employees do you all have?
107-ish. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so wonderful. So thank you so much for your time. And I really do look forward to our audience hearing from you, because they're going to learn so much. So thank you, Mercedes and CMS, for lending us to you for a little bit over an hour today. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. A pleasure talking to you, and continue to provide the amazing services, consulting services that you provide, because you can help businesses really be successful in this business. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.